Hey everyone, so this video is going to be a little different from my normal videos because I want to talk about this piece where SBS Australia looked at how Chinese immigrants to Australia were really struggling with passing on their native tongues to their children. And generally when I see articles on Facebook, I don't really comment on them, but this one really resonated with me, and so I clicked into the comment section. The stuff I was reading in there just really riled me up. I can't believe that I'm sitting here in 2021 and all of that horrible racist discourse that was going on when I was a kid, the sheer racist vitriol that gets spouted, all of these violent crimes against Asians, which is just quite frankly terrifying. It really feels like we've made no progress whatsoever in the last 30 years. The point of the article was to highlight the challenges faced by immigrants and families who were trying to raise bilingual children. It pointed out that it's very difficult with peer pressures and the constant immersion in an English environment to really nurture and maintain that native language and that mother tongue.
他的整个的思维已经变成了一个 English 的思维。
I was that child who came to Australia at a very young age and didn't speak a word of English. Then I started school. From that point on, my parents had to nag, beg, scold, cajole, and they even tried to threaten me with time back in Hong Kong to get me to stop speaking English at home. I thought being sent back to Hong Kong was like the worst possible thing that could happen to me. At that time, which was the early 90s, you had people like Pauline Hanson and her One Nation party at the forefront of national politics. I remember going to school and being made fun of because my parents took the time to pack me rice boxes. These days, bento boxes are all the rage, but at the time, like, the other kids gave me such grief about not bringing, ham and cheese sandwiches to school. It was really hard. So as a young kid, I really didn't feel proud of being Chinese, and I would get into these fights with my mom all the time where she would just be like, 點解你喺屋企唔講中文啊？你識講中文嘅噃? And I was just like, I felt ashamed of being Chinese. And my mom used to say to me, 成世界望住你就係見到你黃皮膚黑頭髮，無論你想點都好，成個世界咧都會覺得你係中國人。And don't even get me started on all of the comments that were going on about how English is the language in Australia, so you should all just be speaking that. Like, what are you even doing trying to speak your native tongue? Come on. That is so obviously racist. I never see the same people complaining about an Italian family trying to teach their kids to speak Italian. It just doesn't happen. They're just like, oh, that's so cool that you guys speak Italian at home. Like, that's so great. I'd love to learn Italian sometime. But just change Italian to Chinese and go back to China, go back to where you came from. English is the language here, blah, 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 blah. Like, that seriously makes me really angry. And if this is your attitude, I think you really need to examine your attitudes and think about why you're saying this. Because what you're really saying to me when you say that is your cultural heritage doesn't matter. When you come here to this country, it doesn't matter how long you've lived here. It doesn't matter what contributions you've made to society. You have no right to be speaking your mother tongue. You have no right to be proud of your heritage, because when you come here, we expect you to be so white that we could use you like a sheet of paper. That is what you're saying to me. And there were so many comments from people who are not ethnically Chinese at all. My kids don't have any problem speaking their mother tongue at home. Like, I just speak it to them and they're totally fine. And they're just like, oh, well, it's your fault. Like, if you want your kids to speak Chinese, then speak Chinese at home. And I was just like, okay, First of all, we don't speak Chinese. Chinese is not a language. There are a collection of various languages and dialects from China and those sort of geographical regions where there was that population, but Chinese itself is not a language. We speak Cantonese, we speak Mandarin, we speak Taiwanese, we speak Hakka, we speak Teotiao, we speak Shanghainese. Like, there are so many languages and dialects in that family of Chinese. English just doesn't even compare, okay? So that's the first thing. Second thing, speak your native language at home. Really? Wow, I never would have thought to do that. Like, that is just such a brilliant, genius idea. I don't know how I ever could have come up with that on my own. Thank you so much. Like, seriously, people? Like, seriously, you think we don't speak our language at home? Like, we do, okay? We do, all the time. But what I'm telling you is that it is not enough. Language learning, the best way to learn a language is to completely immerse yourself in the culture that speaks that language, and that means every day. If you're trying to raise your kid to be bilingual and you look realistically at most working families where both parents are at work all day because like the cost of living here is really expensive, just try and add up all those hours in the day, okay? Like, not everybody has the luxury of having grandparents or other relatives or other family here who can speak that native tongue with their child all day while they're at work. I'm very fortunate in that my parents are here, my in-laws are here, and they can help with that, but still, like, we don't live with them. It's also not something I can ask them to do every day. That's just a lot to ask. The way kids learn languages, and if you have paid any attention whatsoever to how kids learn to talk in the first place, they can't process information or videos or whatever coming from an electronic device, from an app, from a phone, whatever. Like, kids don't learn that way, okay? The way kids learn languages is they learn from listening, copying, and then repeating and engaging in this back and forth ping pong kind of dialogue with a real human person speaking it to them, and then constantly being surrounded by the language. Even though I live in Sydney, which has a very high population of Cantonese speakers, there are just not enough supplemental resources. So what I'm saying is, assuming that you yourself are a confident enough speaker and that you start from when your kid is born and you consistently talk to them in the mother tongue, yeah, like, there's no problem getting them to pick up words in it. We were super careful with my daughter to speak only Cantonese to her. She was fluent in Cantonese to the point that when we went back to Hong Kong with her, she spoke like she was born there, right? In fact, she didn't even know any English until we started daycare, which in hindsight was a mistake because then nobody understood what she was trying to say, and I still have a lot of parental guilt about that. The point is, getting a kid to learn the language in the first place is, in relative terms, not that difficult. The really hard part, right, is getting them to stick with that language and sticking with it all the way through to full literacy. English is such an easy language to learn. It does not even come close to how complicated Chinese languages are. Just because you can understand something that's being said to you in Cantonese, for example, that does not mean you can speak it, because there are these things called tones. And there's at least 4 to 9 of them depending on the language or dialect that you're talking about. Ba, ba, ba. These are all different tones and these are all different words. It's not like English where like your inflection of how you say the word reflects your emotion. No, the tone actually affects which word you're actually using. So if you don't get the tones, you won't be able to actually make yourself be understood, because people will just be like, what are you talking about? Like, you won't make sense. And even then, assuming that you can hold a basic conversation, that is absolutely not the same thing as being fluent verbally, okay? If I need to get directions, find out where the toilets are, I can do all of that. But the minute that you take the conversation to somewhere more complex, like politics or economics or finance or, you know, whatever, like if I wanted to have deeper conversations, more serious conversations, I would not be able to do that in Cantonese. Like I just don't have the vocabulary for it. Supposing that you're good enough that you are fluent verbally, that does not mean you can actually read Chinese. So the written language, the written Chinese language is based on pictograms, which means each character is like a picture of something. There is no phonetic alphabet. If you look at a character and you don't recognize it, there's nothing in that character that tells you how you're meant to pronounce it. The only way you're going to find out is by looking it up in a dictionary or asking somebody like, hey, what does this character say? This is why, even though I am a native speaker myself, if I walked into a Chinese restaurant, I could not order off the Chinese menu because I can't read all of those characters. Like literally the way I order in Chinese restaurants is I think back and remember to all of the Chinese restaurants I've gone to and what all of the common dishes are called, and I just tell the waiter that I want that thing and just hope that they have it on the menu. Even if you can read, that does not necessarily mean you're going to be able to write Chinese, because when you read Chinese, it's about visual recognition of the characters. So you can recognize what a particular character is, for example, but there's no guarantee that you would be able to reproduce that character through writing it. Characters can be very, very complex. Like some characters have upwards of 20 brushstrokes, and all of those brushstrokes have specific placements. There's a proportion to them. There's an order in which you do the brushstrokes. It's not like learning your ABCs in English where you literally just get the same page with like all your letters A to Z printed and you just like trace the dotted lines and done. You're done with the alphabet, and now you just have to remember spelling the words. You have to remember the order of the brushstrokes. You have to remember the different types of brushstrokes. You then have to remember the different components of the character. You then have to remember how all those components go together. You then have to fit all of those components into a square grid to form a word. And if you screw up like one brushstroke, that's it, you've written the character wrong. This is why it is hard, very, very hard for Chinese people to pass down our mother tongues to our children, okay? There's only so much that you can do at home. At the end of the day, when there's that rush between getting everybody through dinner and then the bedtime routine and into bed and prepping everything for the next day and doing all the household chores and things that didn't get done during the day because, you know, hey, we were at work, like, where are you supposed to fit all this in? And on top of all of this, right, as the kids get older, the difficulty of all the subjects that they're studying at school also increase. Unless you're dedicating the same proportional amount of time that is being dedicated to any one of these subjects to Chinese, like, you've got no hope of keeping up solely by, you know, relying on the parents to do stuff at home. Like, you need supplemental resources and stuff to help you if you want your kids to develop Chinese literacy at the same rate as their English literacy. And I would actually argue more than what they're getting at school, because unless you happen to be lucky enough to live in an area where they can go to like a language immersion school where subjects are also taught in your mother tongue, they're going to be learning in English, doing homework in English, speaking with their friends in English, looking at things in English, reading in English, writing in English, conversing with their teachers in English, looking for directions in English, going to the shops in English. Everything that they do from the time that they leave the house to when they get home is entirely in English. Like, it just can't be helped. And if you look at the proportion of waking hours that kids are going to spend at home in the environment of the mother tongue, it is like shockingly few. I don't care how much any parent tries at home just to speak their native language. It is not going to be enough. Alright guys, so I'm sorry for the rant, but I felt like it was just really important. I just felt so riled up by all these comments that I was seeing on this SBS article yesterday. Like, it just really triggered me, and maybe it was because yesterday was the first day of daycare for this week, and so my daughter came home and she was speaking 90% English in response to 100% of the things in Cantonese that I was saying. And then after all of that, to see all these comments in my feed with people saying, well, it's your fault that you're not speaking your mother tongue at home and that's why your daughter's not learning Cantonese, I don't even know what to say. Just don't sound off on things that you have no idea about. No idea about. Anyway, the point of this, besides me going on a massive rant, is just to say, look, if you're trying to raise a bilingual kid, and in particular you're trying to raise your kid to know Mandarin or Cantonese or, you know, any of the other Chinese languages, if your child doesn't take to the native language as much as you hope, it is not your fault or your failure. It is not humanly possible for one or two parents who are at home to pass on the entirety of a language to a child in an environment where 80 to 90% of the time they are surrounded by English. The most important thing you can do is to kindle that love of learning in your child, to give them as many opportunities to speak that language with you, and to give them a reason for learning that language besides, I said so. You already know why it is so important to you for them to learn that second language. So share it with them. Maybe it's about connecting with family and with the older generation in particular. Maybe it's so that they can understand where they came from and the cultural traditions and heritage that they were born to. Maybe so it's that you can share the values and beliefs and the stories that are told in that language. Whatever your reason is, share it with your child and make sure they understand why you believe this is so important and make the process fun for them. And there will be so many times where you get so discouraged and you're just like, maybe I should just throw in the towel, because after all, at 8:30 p.m. at night, when they're still not in their PJs and they're still not in bed and they still haven't brushed their teeth and they still haven't showered, you're just like, do I really want to have a fight now about which language we're speaking at home when we're just having trouble communicating in the first place? Don't get down on yourself. Don't despair. Whatever you're doing, whatever you're trying, keep going, because every little bit matters. And someday your child will look back on all the things that you tried to do and they'll be able to appreciate it when they're older. Finally, if you're feeling super alone, find a community of other parents going on the same journey as you. Thanks for sitting through my rant, and let me know how you feel in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and don't forget to check out the other videos on my channel.